Hello and welcome to Frank's School. I continue to go through my very best rags, collection of my very best rags. Alright, the trip. There's a dark side. There's absolutely a dark side to this trip. There was a bad time. There were two dramatically bad times for me. And one of them occurred the day I was supposed to leave. I did something very stupid, and I realized that I'm not smart enough to travel by myself. I don't think traveling by yourself is a good idea anyway, but I'm not smart enough. The stupid thing I did was I neglected to consider that the gate, the departure gate, could change. I trusted what my boarding pass said, and it said D28 or something like that was the gate. It was written in there, and it said nothing on that boarding pass that the gate might change. It said nothing about that. Now, an average traveler knows perfectly well that gates change, but I was there way early. I had probably 4 hours that I could sit and wait, and I watched, and the time wasn't changing. I knew that the times change, that it might go later. I knew about that, or maybe earlier. And after a while, I kept checking on that, and I checked steadily on that. And then I went and I looked, and here it flashed. It said boarding, and I had been sitting there, and there was nothing about boarding. There had been no announcement, and that's why I was so puzzled, because it seemed like, gee, it's time. We ought to be getting on that plane. Well, they had changed the gate. I had to rush through the airport. It was far away. I didn't make it in time, and it was a disaster that was resolved. To the credit of the airline company, they were a little put out with me, but there had been no announcement at the gate where I was obediently sitting for all these hours. There was no announcement that it had been changed. Look somewhere else. They had not said it over the PA system that I could hear. So in a sense, I had an argument, but I'll admit to the stupidity. I'm not a veteran traveler. I travel maybe once a year and then to Europe. I don't travel very much. So that gate change was bad. And the result was I could not fly that night. And they had to do all kinds of changing and make other arrangements, which they did. It was United Airlines, and I need to credit them. They worked very hard on solving this problem for me. And they really could have said, well, this was your fault. That would have been an argument. I could have argued on that to some extent. But anyway, it was resolved. I spent that night with my daughter. Again, second time, I was embarrassed to say what had happened. I continue to be embarrassed that I would have done something so stupid. So it was bad. I wasn't feeling good about that. And then the next day, I left earlier, and I had a very long wait in the Newark airport this time. And the luggage went separately. The luggage went without me, which was real shocking. It was an international flight. That luggage went without me. I wasn't on the plane. And supposedly it was in Lisbon waiting for me, but it shouldn't have been because of terrorism, the passengers have to accompany their luggage. Well, anyway, that was bad. Well, in Newark now, another thing that was maybe not as bad, but I have named a condition, Kak Shock. I called it Kak Shock. I realized that's what was going on. By the end of that day in the Newark airport, I'd been there a long time waiting, and I was overwhelmed by the kilocalories as currency all around me. I found it overwhelming, and it made me feel practically sick that in the Newark airport that I was surrounded by such an excessive consumption of kilocalories. Now, this has to do with kilocalories as currency, which probably you can't see now. It has very much to do with wages paradigm, and so you may not understand that. But here I had come from a world where I'm planting a garden 3 miles away. I planted a garden in tires, and I said that one gallon of gasoline is worth 250 man-hours, and so just one time running the lawnmower around that garden is more than I would put in the whole thing, because I didn't plow and I didn't rototill. So conscious of kilocalories, the consumption of kilocalories in gardening. So aware that if I get in my little pickup truck and drive over there to look at the garden and come back, already I've consumed more kilocalories than the garden would require in a whole year. Thinking like that, that's where I was coming from. And here I'm in the Newark airport. At one point I saw a bird that had somehow accidentally got in a door. It was a little sparrow, I think. It was flying around up above all this stuff, and I thought, wow, I can relate to that bird. It seems so out of place. In a way, that little bird seemed more comfortable in its surroundings than I was when it was getting to me. So a disease? No, I don't think. But a condition? Yeah. And I think it's a serious condition. I need to be aware of that. I need to steel myself for it if I ever go through such an experience. I mean, I was going from an abandoned village here, Conemaugh, from a time before, well, when everything was manpower. And my ultimate destination was José's Mill in Galicia, which is a water-powered mill, 250 years old. And in between those two points, I had to immerse myself in such a world of kilocalorie consumption. The flight, of course, but more than that. So you may not want to hear about it. Sensory overload, yes, but that's not. I know about that. Sure, I was overwhelmed. My senses were overwhelmed because that's not the world I live in. But it was more than that. And I think there's maybe only one S. Decommissioning. I even got thinking. You might even call these evil thoughts in a way, because I have been decommissioning a house trailer for years, really, taking it apart, and what a mess it was to do that. But I'm gaining on it and recycling stuff as I go. But then I got thinking, boy, as hard as that is, how about decommissioning an airplane? By decommissioning, I mean taking it apart, reducing it, ending it. I learned the word because there was a lot of worry about windmills that were going to go up on top of the ridges here, and who was going to decommission them? Would they just stay there? If they would they just end up being abandoned? That was a big question that the neighbors had. Decommissioning an airplane. And then what about decommissioning an airport? I mean, I say, these were practically evil thoughts because I felt so out of place in the Newark airport. And nothing against the Newark airport. I'm sure it's a good airport. And then what about a city? What about the city of Newark or New York City? How do you decommission a city? Or how about an entire material culture? How do you decommission it? It's one thing to build it, but what about decommissioning it? And I thought about the Colosseum. I don't know if that's spelled right. The Colosseum. When I was in Rome one time, different times, they were saying that the Colosseum had become a quarry. There's not that much of it there. The marble had been taken off the sides and many of the stones, so that only about, maybe half of it is still there. And that's so terrible that they did that. Actually, in a way, that was a very sensible thing to do. They were decommissioning the Colosseum, the people after the fall of the Roman Empire. I don't want to go too long about this, but that dreary feeling that I had, I thought of my daughter this morning when I was thinking about explaining this. And when she was just little, just a babe in arms, really, she could talk. We were in New Hampshire, and we went to the top of Cannon Mountain in this tramway. And the view was beautiful. We're up on top of the mountain, and you could see nothing but woods all the way around. This is New Hampshire, and I was holding her. And her comment was, "How do we get home?" And I thought, that made so much sense to be thinking about that. I mean, I was into the beauty of it all and all that, and she's thinking, how do we get home? And I think I maybe had some of that same kind of lost feeling in that airport. And later I had it again sort of gently. I'll tell you about that in Lisbon later on. Tomorrow I'll pick it up. Things improve, and we'll get going along with the trip. So see you tomorrow.